What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios for episode 3 of building a custom UT-AT in Lego. This week, it's time for the gun show. I'm going to be building the big cannons that sit on the sides of the tank, as well as fixing a big problem that I ran into last episode with the anti-personnel cannons and how to get the barrels to move up and down. And I'm going to be building the gunner stations inside the tank that operate those cannons. And if that wasn't enough to get you excited, we're going to be finally seeing what the front of the tank looks like with all the paneling in place. So don't forget to execute order 66 on that like button, and let's get building. As I started planning how I wanted to build the front of the tank, I realized the section I left open for it looks too long. I've built a good chunk of the tank already, and I still have a lot of open space in front of me. And you can see past this hump, there's only the front panels and the cockpit. And I've got more than enough space for all that. So I decided to shrink the frame even more, which will only make it more stable as there will be less of the frame suspended above the ground. Now I can start building the actual panels, and let me tell you, I've never tried to capture such complicated shapes in Lego before. I mean, look at this picture. The tank has panels sloping in basically every direction, and then they meet up at super weird angles like here or here, forming many shapes that Lego parts just weren't really built to make. I kind of feel like I'm trying to make a balloon animal with a live snake. I resorted to just sitting there with a bin of wedge plates and a bowl of Cheez-Its, building panels with different sizes of wedge plate and seeing what combos fit together the best. This is what I've come up with so far. Just ignore the tiles on top of the panels. They're just temporarily holding things together. I like the shape I've created so far. The most important angles for me are the downward slope on the side of the tank, the curve connecting the side to the front, and then the downward angle of the front panels. However, I think this section is still too short. The front of the actual tank is super long and pretty big. Honestly, the front looks kind of like a giant snowplow, but my panels just don't give off that massive snowplowish vibe. But the good news is, at least I have the correct panels down with the right wedge plates, so I can just recreate those same panels, but a little bit bigger and in their final form, so they'll be all tiled off and smooth. I honestly don't know how vehicle builders are able to put out as many models as they do, and with instructions. My vehicle might be looking good from the outside, but think about the interior. It's just a bunch of brick towers holding up panels and hinges. I think next week I'm probably going to start building some kind of Technic frame for it. I'm using hinge plates for the front panels even though they aren't actually hatches to be raised. The side panels have a ball joint connection. This allows them to move the panels from side to side, front to back, or in and out. The longer I've built with Lego, the more I realized how underrated ball joints are. If you haven't tried them yet, I would highly recommend it. For the gap between the two panels, I built a little hinge with some cylinders. I got this idea from my acclimator, which allows me to slope plates at two different angles, and then a 3x12 wedge plate covers that gap perfectly. The paneling is finally done, and it's time to talk guns. I built some anti-personnel cannons in the last episode, and one of the issues I had was the barrel. It looked kind of ugly, especially where the hinge was that moved the barrel up and down, and the other option, while better looking, couldn't shoot at the ground. And let's be honest, what's the point of having anti-personnel cannons if they can't point at the ground? Then Darth Revan 4485 came in clutch with the suggestion to use a Lego wrench piece and slide that into the cylinder at the base of the barrel, thus making it much more realistic, shorter, and still able to move up and down. Basically the perfect solution, so huge thanks to you, man. Other than that, these guns are going to look the same as the originals. And interior fans, get excited because later on in the update, I'm going to be building and designing the gunning stations for the gunners that are going to be manning these cannons inside the tank. Now it's time for the big guns. The UT-AT has 3 massive cannons, 2 on the sides and 1 on top. I'm going to start with the guns on the side since, I don't have a top yet. The side cannons don't look too complicated, basically a frame or body connected to a super long barrel. I noticed the body isn't rectangular though, it's like 2 angled panels connected together. So I'm going to use a brick with studs on all sides to connect 2 panels at an angle to the gun. Leave it to the UT-AT to have angled panels even on its gun. I guess it's fitting considering all the angles I've had to deal with building the bridge for Magito and the rest of this tank, so these 2 builds are definitely meant for each other. I should rename both these series How to Drive Yourself Crazy with Angles 101. Oh boy, we got ourselves a tank. This thing is continuing to come together very nicely. Starting here on the back, here we have the new gun barrel design. Much happier with it. I think this is definitely the way I want to go. There is still one thing I'm trying to decide, and that is like where exactly the barrel's going to sit, because you can see I scooted, this is where the barrel was originally, and the wrench is all the way back in the housing of the gun. And the problem with that is the barrel can now rotate up, but this is as far down as it goes because it hits those studs right there. So the gun's still only able to shoot out in front of itself. It can now shoot at incoming aircraft, but no infantry. So this option right here, I actually scooted the whole thing forward. So now the wrench is exposed, but you can point all the way down. And honestly, I don't think it's that bad having the wrench section exposed. And you can see a little bit of the clip as well, but I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, but I think I'm gonna go with this option. Speaking of guns, we got a couple of massive cannons on the side. At first, I didn't really like how long the guns were on the UTAT, but I realized it's an artillery, it's a giant artillery gun, so you want nice long barrels. So I'm happy with how these look. They fit on the side of the tank pretty easily, and they can rotate up and down. So I can pose it however I want, if I want it shooting up in the air, or I can go point it down to the ground. The one thing I don't like is this section right here. I feel like it's too small. If you look on the actual tank, this part, it's pretty big. Like it takes up, a good little section of the tank. So I think what I'm gonna do is just make it a little bit longer. Everything else is pretty good in my opinion. Now the front, this is where we have the most to talk about. I spent pretty much all the morning and a good chunk of the afternoon just playing around with different wedge plates, widths, lengths, trying to get all the different angles, trying to get everything to fit together. I know there are people out there who like to do the exact recreations, and that's cool, and I love looking at that stuff. But for me, I'm more interested in like capturing the essence, the look of something, so that when you look at it, I make you think of, whatever it was I was trying to build, kind of like what I did with the acclimator. So that's kind of what I decided to do here, is not worry about every single angle, especially because this isn't minifig scale. So that means it's going to be a little bit less detailed. This is going to be a little bit more reminiscent of a play scale set. This part is still a little bit short. I feel like it could be just a little bit longer, but I honestly don't know if I want to keep playing around with this because I got to finish this tank at some point. I can't keep fiddling around just trying to get, one or two more studs. I feel like it looks good as is, and maybe adding a little bit more studs might make it look a little bit better, but that doesn't necessarily mean how it looks now is bad. The nice thing about building is this doesn't have to be the final design for me. I could 2 weeks down the road have this genius idea or this brainwave and be like, oh, I know how to make it longer. I know how to make it better. The important thing is now I have something that I'm satisfied with, so I can continue moving onward, and I can always come back and revisit it if I need to. There is one section or one part I'm not super happy with, and that's this wedge plate right here. It was really hard to get it into place. You can see it adds a really cool angle right there because it kind of slants up like this, over like that, and then flat. But I don't like how blocky or kind of how it overhangs right here at the bottom. You can see the tip of the wedge plate kind of hangs over this other one. I feel like that doesn't really look super realistic, kind of makes the piece look out of place. But I experimented with different widths, lengths, like I said earlier. Like I've tried so many different combinations, and this kind of gave me the best overall covering because it's a pretty seamless fit up here and up here. So honestly, to have this section be the only part that kind of overhangs, I think is livable for now. I first decided to add gunner stations inside the tank while looking over Mangetsu's model, which I've been using as inspiration. He has all kinds of stuff inside his tank, and one of which were chairs and computers to operate the cannons, and I thought that was just such a good idea. And since the back of this tank is like a giant box, I figured I'd have lots of room and should take advantage of that. I'm using a seat design I made for a Jedi Starfighter a while ago that never really got completed, but at least the seat design can live on. The computers are going to be, very computer-like. It must be fun sitting in an armored tank shooting droids on a screen. Honestly, sounds like the most realistic version of playing Battlefront anyone could get. I was going to add some weapons racks as well, but I remembered I have individual weapon holders next to each seat, so it just didn't really feel necessary. I'm also going to lengthen the body of the cannon. I think an extra 2 studs should do the trick. I'm hoping to get the roof on next episode or the one after so I can start on that last gun, which is going to be the most complicated of the 3. The gunner station looks great. I have the clones facing each other to coordinate and work together, or just spill the tea after a long battle. I made the seats adjustable so the gunners can go from action mode to nap time with the push of a button. Nice thing is this whole section doesn't take up much space, so let me know in the comments other things you would like to see me include inside the tank. The gun looks so much better now. It's crazy how big of a difference just 2 studs can make. One thing that surprised me about this tank, and still does, was how colorful it is. Well, relative to your typical Republic tank. The yellow and red highlights look so good, but I did forget to add the red markings on the front of the tank, so I'll need to add that in next episode. Well, another episode in the books, and this was a big one because I was planning on only having 5 to 6 episodes in this series, which means I'm officially at the halfway point. And honestly, I feel like this series is going better than expected so far. The build is looking really good, really happy with how everything is coming together on it. There haven't been any like super big hangups or disappointments. And I'd say I'm about halfway done with the tank. It may not look that way, but a lot of these early episodes have been a lot of planning, designing and adjusting. But moving forward, what I have coming next is gonna be a lot easier to design and build because it's gonna be fitting into a pre-existing thing instead of me just coming up with something out of nothing. Next week, I wanna get the cockpit designed and in place, as well as starting on the roof, since what I have now is really just a placeholder to be able to hold up those anti-personnel cannons. All that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about everything down below in the comments, and I will catch you next time. But until then, happy building.